Welcome to part 2 of our delicious conversation with three-term Democratic Congressman Dean Phillips. He's from Minnesota and he's running for president against Joe Biden. We've had a big discussion in the first part of the show. By the way, if you didn't hear the first part of the show, please go back. There's some real gems in there. Dean is not approaching certainly politics in the way that we've traditionally seen. He's coming at it from a different point of view. He has a background in business. He has served on boards. He has that business background that a lot of people liked about Donald Trump. The only difference is he's not declared bankruptcy at any point in time and seems to have a pretty integral background, not least of all in the fact that he has also been pretty bipartisan while he's been in Congress and has really worked to bring people together rather than playing on those outside factions of the extreme right and the extreme left. We talked a lot at the beginning about change and hope. We talked about Obama. We talked about how people voted for Trump for the same reason they voted for Obama, that they wanted change. And one of the things that Dean brought up was, even if we count in people like RFK Jr., if we count in Marianne Williamson and even Professor Cornel West, all exceptional human beings in their own way, each of them is not in the same generation as Dean is, that they are going to be in their 70s, whereas Dean is in his very early 50s, and this is time for a new generation. And I want to talk now about, as you move forward, because I'm a bit of a researcher, as I have to be, and so there's a guy, political strategist, by the name of Steve Schmidt. Steve Schmidt brought us Sarah Palin, wow, and he's the man behind the Lincoln Project, a group that was funded against former President Trump. But he also did a lot of stuff around super PACs and all the rest of it. And I believe now he's a political strategist for you. Is that true? I don't want to assume anything. A bright guy.
Let me tell you about what he did and what I believe he's doing now, which, and by the way, I think he would tell you differently about the Sarah Palin thing, which I know is attributed to him. Nonetheless, of course, he was a Republican. He managed John McCain's campaign, I believe. He, with the advent of Donald Trump and Trumpism, he left the party, became an independent, and he's been a Democrat for 3 years. Of course, he started the Lincoln Project to defeat Donald Trump, and many give him a lot of the credit for doing so. In fact, President Biden, I'm told and understand, called Steve Schmidt to thank him for that support because President Biden only won by 40,000 votes in a few states. When I spent the last year, Dov, trying to encourage the President Biden to pass the torch, when he didn't do that, I encouraged other candidates who are perhaps better known than me, at least right now, to enter the race because we need you now to meet the moment, not 2028, but right now. They didn't do so. And I was growing very frustrated because I could tell the country was ready for change. I saw the polls becoming horrifically ominous. And I eventually even left the House Democratic leadership table because my perspectives on this race and what needed to be done were very incongruent with those in my caucus. Even though they said the same things quietly and behind the doors, publicly they were saying something different because that's how this whole game works. And I got a DM from Steve Schmidt asking if I'd be on his podcast, right. Not unlike what you did. Exactly, in fact. And look at when people DM me, I actually...
By the way, Guy actually is telling the truth.
Yeah,
we don't look for guests. We've not looked for a guest in 7 or 8 years, but every now and then we'll reach out to somebody. We reached out to Dean. Dean responded. Dean and I were chatting on Twitter before I was talking to his people. This is a guy who's actually ears to the ground.
Yeah, I want to be engaged. Most candidates pretend. They have someone pretending they're the candidate. And I think that is I think that's part of the problem, but whole nother story. So I get a DM from Steve Schmidt, asked me on his podcast. This is early October. And I said, sure. I did his podcast, talked about many of the same issues that we're talking about right now, about the next election, his concerns, my concerns. He called me, I think the next day, and said, Dean, look, I shared my podcast with a number of people I respect, and we all feel the same way. You should do this. And I kind of laughed. And he said, no, I don't think you understand. In 2020, many of us believed that Joe Biden was the only one who could defeat Donald Trump. We started the Lincoln Project to accomplish that task. We did so. In 2024, he said, President Biden, we think, is probably the only one who can lose to Donald Trump. And conversely, we believe you are the one that can defeat him. So if you're willing to enter the race, I can help you a little bit. And I asked him what he meant because I said, look, Steve, there's not a Democratic campaign manager or consultant that would even work with me because they'd get blackballed and never work again in Washington. And he said, look, I can get you to the dance. I know enough about the process. I've done it before, and I think it's existential, and I know we don't know each other that well, and I was a Republican, you're a Democrat, and I said, you know what, Steve, I'll talk to my family. I did, and in 2 weeks, we set up a presidential campaign. I entered the race here in New Hampshire on October 27th. At that point, Steve, by the way, was never a paid member of the team. He wasn't the manager.
Yeah.
He helped. There's no question. He left, I think, about a month ago, right after I declared my candidacy, and is now doing his own thing. I believe he's set up his own super PAC that is going to try to defeat Donald Trump again, period. Just like the Lincoln Project did in 2020. And that's what he's doing. I'm now led by Zach Grauman, who was Andrew Yang's campaign manager. I have Jeff Weaver. Jeff Weaver was Bernie Sanders' campaign manager. When I talk about teams of rivals, I mean it. I want people who see things differently, have different backgrounds. I make the decisions at the end of the day. It's my principles, my decisions, but I want perspective, I want feedback, and I want ideas from a very broad cross-section of people. And that's how I operate. And so there you have the answer. And I got to tell you, he's a smart man. When you take on the establishment, when you anger people who are protecting their power, of course, you take a lot of arrows. My experience with Steve was a very good one.
Steve Schmidt is a political force. There's no doubt about it. The work that they did with the Lincoln Project, Conway and him did amazing things. These are guys who were very Republican and kind of ruthlessly Republican in their day. Conway was a ruthless Republican, and so was Steve Schmidt. I remember reading interviews with McCain saying that Schmidt wanted him to say certain things, and he's like, nope, not saying that. I thought McCain was a great candidate, but it's really interesting for me, and this is why I'm having this conversation with you. Because I remember McCain before he was running for president, and I really liked him. He made fun of himself on SNL. He was good. I liked him a lot. I really appreciated that he had a sense of humor about things. I liked Mitt Romney until he was running. And then, what is this garbage you're puking out that's so not you? I think Mitt's gone a bit more back to where he was, but now he's out. He's not got any power again. And the concern, I think, for people is, this is all great, Dean. You're a good guy and you sound good and you've got all the background. But when you get into the pig pen, Trump talked about cleaning the swamp and just made it more swampy. And when you get in there, how do we know that this is going to stick? Because I just think that people don't trust it.
Yeah, look at it. To anybody who would ask that question, who should be everybody, why have you lost faith? Why do you not trust? Well, you know what? I'm one of you. The only reason I ran for Congress is because I am one of you. I'm part of that exhausted majority. I'm so appalled. I've been so like Dove. So many people probably listening or watching are probably come from backgrounds maybe not that unlike mine, where forefathers and foremothers left some faraway place to come to this place for a better life, for an opportunity to save themselves, to provide economic possibility, right? And I understand. I've been so lucky. I lose my dad in Vietnam, and I'm adopted into a remarkable family. I've been so fortunate. And that's why I'm doing this. I understand why people are skeptical and why they've lost faith in government and why they're all the same. I can tell you I'm different, and transparently, I'm not doing this for money. I'm not doing this to get another job when I'm done. If anything, it has cost me a whole lot. It's cost me a lot of threats. It's cost me a lot of attacks on me and my background and my family and all the nonsense that you have to tolerate going through this. I just want to affiliate myself with people who lost faith. The difference is, it's not about me. And maybe this is the difference between Mitt Romney and John McCain either, which is I'm going to call on the better angels of every American. I want the courage, not just of those who run for office. The courage that matters is the courage of a country. And the courage that matters is, do you have the courage to go out and vote in a primary? Do you have the courage to take on a party? Do you have the courage to go against a system that is actually working against what I believe is what the country really, really needs? Do you have the courage, like so many do, to get up at midnight to go work the overnight shift? Do you have the courage to go get your cancer treatments and still go home and take care of your kids? Do you have the courage to wake up every morning when you can barely make ends meet? But that's the courage that I wish the country would start calling on right now, because we are full of courage and we're full of faith, but we've lost a lot of it. Look at, the only thing I can do is show up on podcasts like yours, answer the questions, tell you the truth as I see it, assess me in the way that I hope you would assess any candidate. I wish other candidates would show up. And here's the problem with, I think, what happened to Romney and McCain. Once you start getting handled by consultants, it's really easy to concede to them. And I think if in an era where Americans are really desperate for authenticity, that's why Donald Trump does so well. He doesn't listen to anybody. And look at his success. So why not watch someone like Donald Trump? Don't take on his character or his values or his narcissism. But I think we should learn, Democrats should learn about authenticity, about speaking the truth, about telling people something they may not want to hear, saying the quiet part out loud, and most of all, showing up in places where you're not expected. Those are attributes that I think that every candidate should have. And I understand why people are skeptical. I'm one of them. And when I'm elected president, I think people will see very quickly how differently I do this, because I don't want to do it for me. I don't want to do it for my party. I want to do it for the country that gave me so darn much, and do it for everyone's kids and ensure that they have a chance. Because if anyone's a parent right now and you're not afraid, then you're not paying attention. And I don't think doing it the same way with the same people who've been making the problems for so many years is the way to proceed. And by the way, Donald Trump added $7 trillion to the federal debt here. Joe Biden's adding the same amount. We've seen what happens under a Trump administration. Americans are opining on what they feel like under a Biden administration. They can't afford their lives right now. If people want the same, and when you know what you're getting, and they really think we can't do better, boy, is that sad. I really think we can. And I'm really excited to at least present that choice to Americans.
Right. I recently wrote an article and posted an image, and the image I put on it was the homelessness in San Francisco. And then I put on the other side of that image, an image from the Great Depression. And it looks, the colors are different, but it looks pretty much the same. And I think if you are above that line, you can, well, it's not me, so I don't have to look at it. And people are living in these fraction worlds now, certainly based on social media. They live in the bubble. They don't expand beyond the bubble. I often say to people, the worst advice you ever got was surround yourself with like-minded people. That's terrible advice. Clearly, that's not what you're doing. But at the same time, even at an economic level, you've got homeless middle-class people. Talk to us a little bit about policy around that. How do we grasp that? Because this seems quite unsurmountable when these wealthy cities like San Francisco, like LA, like New York, like Vancouver, even in a Canadian country, down the street from where I live, in one of the wealthiest areas, downtown Vancouver, there's homelessness down the street. And I know that my friends in LA and in New York and San Francisco have got the same thing.
Yeah. No, I love Van, by the way. But first of all, when I talk about my policy priorities, number 1, 2, and 3 are affordability. Housing, education, healthcare, groceries. They are not affordable in the United States right now. When you just mentioned homelessness, let me tell you, this is one of my foremost planks. I've been to San Francisco. I'd been there a number of times over my life. I'd not been there since COVID. I just went there last week for the first time. Yeah. I was horrified. It was like a post-apocalyptic nightmare. Only temporarily resolved when President Xi and President Biden came to town. What did the town do? It cleaned itself up, and it's embarrassing. Exactly. It's a Potemkin village, which we should be offended by. Of course, and I've been in Los Angeles. I've been in all the big cities around the country regularly. I'm used to seeing homelessness, and sadly, it becomes normalized. But I'll tell you, what's really horrified me, Dove, being in New Hampshire and seeing in Concord, New Hampshire, in Veterans Park right in Manchester, seeing homeless men, veterans, sleeping outside in the smaller towns in this country all over the place. It has jarred me, and it has only because of what I'm doing right now, listening to people and seeing with my own eyes, not sitting in Washington and watching TVs, but actually seeing it and talking to people. Homelessness and ending it is my foremost priority, and there's a way to do it. It's not just money. We've got money because we live in a market economy, thank goodness, which means that if there is an economic opportunity to be successful, you won't just have one person go pursue it. You'll have thousands go do it. If there was money to be made building housing right now, or we had laws that would allow it to be built, it would be built because we are 7 million units shy to accommodate the need in the United States of America. So when I'm president, we will have a housing bank to support private investors who are willing to put shovels in the ground. We have to change some zoning laws, and we have to change some of the regulatory red tape that communities are putting in place. The same communities that are screaming to end homelessness have laws on their books that make building affordable housing almost impossible.
This is the thing, Dean.
That is one of my foremost priorities.
Stuff that I see a lot of the time, which is homelessness is terrible.
I agree.
But push them away from me.
Not in my yard.
Hold on a second. If you're bothered about it, why aren't you doing something? Or, well, I don't want them building reasonable housing near me because I live in a better neighborhood. Well, you're going to devalue my property. Do you give a shit about homelessness or not? That's the bottom line.
There you go.
And if you can't get off your high horse, you're no better than anybody else who's screaming on the other side. Are you willing to put your feet on the ground, your hands in the dirt, and say, I'm willing to be part of the solution rather than the problem? I've said, when people say to me, what can I do? And I say, if you don't have any money, let me just tell you something you can do. And they go, what? I say, give dignity. And they go, what do you mean? I go, you pass a homeless person, don't pretend they don't exist. Look at them and smile and say, hey, how are you? And when they say, I'm having a rough day, you can decide to engage in a conversation. You can give them some money or not. But I'll just tell you, because I did this the other day, because it's my thing. But a guy was homeless, and he was right by where I'd just gone in to get some food. And I came out, and I took $5 out of my wallet, and I gave it to him. And he said, you don't have to do this, man. And I said, you're right, I don't. I'm completely free. I said, however, you're a human being, and so am I. And this $5 might make a difference in your life. It won't make any difference in mine that I've given you away. But here's what I want you to know. And he goes, what? I said, it's not my money anymore. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, do with it whatever you want. I'm not here to judge it. Give somebody dignity. This is what I feel like is missing at a political level. We're not giving people dignity. We're categorizing them. Oh, they're homeless, or they're of this group or that group. All these groups that turn us into othering. And that is what we've seen with American foreign policy. It's been about othering. And so when I come to that, and I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to come to that, because as we move forward, American foreign policy, my opinion, not the truth, it's been behind a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the world today. We're financing a lot of money into the Ukraine. We've got this shit going on in Gaza. And I will say, I'm a Jew, but I'm definitely not pro-Israel. I know that upsets a lot of people. I'm not shy about that. Do I think there's room for a place of Israel? Yes, but not the Israel that exists today in the way that exists today. The West Bank is a horrendous situation, in my opinion. But when I look at that, that's the colonialism of Britain that set that up. And now the economic colonialism, which I've seen with America since the 70s. And then you've got now the financial colonialism of China. People don't have any idea how much money they're putting into Africa and into South America. And they're doing it because South Americans don't trust America. They don't trust the U.S. because they screwed them over. Henry Kissinger, another one of our tribe, got the Nobel Peace Prize. War criminal. My category. How do we get all this straight? I know I just threw a truckload at you. I'm sorry, man, but
no,
you know what I mean? There's a lot here.
There is. One thing you just said about dignity, by the way, I'm on a mission of repair and dignity, affording it to everybody, no matter your gender, your pronouns, your race, your religion, how you eat, how you pray, how you sleep, how you think, what you want to do, what your politics are, or how you live. My goodness, we got to end this nonsense. And I think why we respond, many people in this country and around the world, in Canada too, when you see someone homeless or asking for help, I think we're really embarrassed. When you really get down to it, I think we shy away because we don't want to see the truth. And by the way, I think that's a metaphor for what's going on in all around the world right now. We don't want to see the truth because when it looks us right in the eye, it's really embarrassing and it's really horrifying. And that's why I think we got to end this nonsense. Our foreign policy, Dove, it's a bit, I go back to my dad dying in Vietnam. For what? The same government that afforded him his college education sends him to a country halfway around the world to die for what? For what? He's one of 1 million Americans who have died for freedom, some of them in very honorable fashions, most of them, in fact. But when I see Vietnam veterans right now and around New Hampshire, everywhere I'm traveling, I welcome them home because our country didn't even welcome them home. I think what Americans have to realize is a couple things. First and foremost, we have over 700 installations and bases in over 80 countries around the world. It's the most expansive nation state in the history, I believe, of the world. And we spend $1 trillion, I mean, really in the 800 billions, but you add it all up, it's approaching $1 trillion a year. And this is a country that has kids going to school hungry and people sleeping in streets and veterans who are homeless. We don't have a mental or emotional healthcare system. We have a healthcare system, not even healthcare, sick care, that doesn't even provide for everybody, as you well know. Millions of people who have no coverage whatsoever, others going bankrupt. We don't have pre-K education. Our public education system is really crumbling, and college affordability is beyond the reach of most people without taking on an extraordinary amount of debt. And I'm surprised. I look at a country's budget as a reflection of its principles and values, and I don't think Americans are looking carefully at it. So our foreign policy, I do believe, has to change. America should and always will have the strongest national defense imaginable. I don't think we're using the right strategies against bioterrorism, against cyber terrorism. I don't think we're prepared for artificial intelligence, which will be the defining revolution of this entire century, mark my words, economically and socially. I will say it's already happening. We're being subject to it. We need 21st century leadership. We need 21st century solutions, and we need a generation, not in their 80s, but in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, perhaps even younger, by the way, that can understand what is coming and prepare for it and create a strategy to defend ourselves from it. If we're going to spend $1 trillion a year, what if we spent $100 billion of that on ending the homeless crisis in America, for example, right? What if instead of forcing migrants to come from countries that they're trying to escape economic or even safety and security challenges and having to spend their whole life savings to cross that border by paying a Mexican cartel, what if we simply said, you can file for asylum in your country of origin, and if you qualify, you can come to America, we'll bring you here. And when you come here, you'll have your $7,000 in your pocket to start a new life here. Rather than saying you got to spend every dime to get across our border illegally, basically, if you want to become an American. And then you're going to take 2 years. You can't work because we don't let you, and you're not going to have any money because you gave it to the Mexican cartel. Why don't we look at things like that? Why don't we use our foreign aid budget to keep people safer in the countries from which they're coming? Why don't we invest in the Northern Triangle countries to make sure that people have some security, have some opportunity? Why don't we build dorms next to our consulates to keep people safe while they're going through that filing process for asylum? Every problem, if you look upstream, can be solved, but our foreign policy is designed to prevent problems from reaching our border. And I think it's getting awfully hard to argue that it's working real well. And I don't think Americans, as a country, I don't think Americans have a sense of how the rest of the world sees us anymore. And I feel responsible to let people know.
You're absolutely right.
And if we think, exactly, and by the way, it takes a little humility. Strength takes humility. Leadership takes courage. By the way, the root of courage is la cour. You know that as a Canadian. La cour, the heart, right? I think America should be that country. Courage starts with a good heart, and courage starts with looking in the mirror and speaking the truth and always saying the quiet part out loud. That's what I'm doing.
We're coming towards the end here. Let's pretend that the primaries are done. You are up there. Who do you want to debate most?
Well, I would love to debate President Biden. I'm astounded that he heretofore has said when I say he's not said anything, by the way, the Democratic National Committee basically has said for him they won't have a debate. I think that's absurd. I cannot wait to debate Donald Trump. Cannot wait to look that man in the eye. I have done it already. I know men like that, how weak they are, what kind of bullies they are. I know their failures. I know what they're trying to cover for. I cannot wait. But more than that, I can't wait to invite people. This should not be about confrontation. In fact, this is probably a metaphor for, I think, how the United States has to start acting. We should be a country of invitation, not necessarily confrontation. We should be prepared for it. God knows. We need to be prepared because the times do come where we need kinetic action and activity to defend ourselves and actually to bring peace. But for the most part, let's be a country of invitation. That means domestically, and that means internationally. And if we do so, I think we're in for an extraordinary future ahead. And that's why I think the 2024 election is so consequential. And I hope people here in the United States vote in the primary, because if they do, they're going to create change that they never even imagined is still possible. And that will restore faith.
I would love to see you in a debate, certainly with Biden, but I'd like to see you in a debate with Gavin Newsom. I'd like to see you in a debate.
Oh, sure. Hey, Nikki Haley. I love debates. I learn more from debates
with Nikki Haley.
Debate shouldn't be about me making points. Yeah.
Whether I agree with them or not, they're intelligent people, not just shouting each other down, which is needed. We desperately need that.
I would love to debate first of all, anybody. If I might, just before we close, you mentioned Israel. I feel compelled to actually reference that as the ranking member of the Middle East Subcommittee on Foreign Affairs in the U.S. House. I'm of the Jewish faith, too. I'm sure you know that. I care deeply about Israel. I believe not only does it need to exist, it must. There are 200 Christian majority nations in the world, about 140, I think, Muslim. And there's only one Jewish majority nation in the world. And we all know what happened in the Holocaust. We all know what happened with pogroms. But what many people don't know is that the first boats that tried to bring refugees from the Holocaust to the United States, they were turned away.
Same in England.
And they were sent back. And if someone could, and same in England, So there, I think any person of decency would recognize that there's a place for a single majority Jewish nation in the world, and that is Israel. And I have great empathy for the Palestinians. I want to be the first Jewish American president in history that signs documents that establishes a state of Palestine, because I believe in Israel, and I think it can only be safe and secure when there is a state of Palestine next to it, living in peace and prosperity and opportunity and, frankly, neighborliness. And I'm appalled by Hamas, what they did on October 7th. I'm appalled that they are a terrorist organization that does the most horrific things to human beings. They're the enemy of Israel, by the way. And of course, they're the enemy of Palestinians, point of the Palestinian Authority.
Hamas is not
they do
the Palestinians any more than hard right-wing. And by the way, these are political figures in Israel who openly call themselves fascists. It's not my opinion. Right. They call themselves that. They are not representative of Jews.
No, and that's what I want to make clear. I'm someone who says regularly, two things can be true at once, right? Hamas is horrifying. They must be eliminated. By the way, the Palestinian Authority, corrupt. They have a pay-to-slay program that literally rewards Palestinians who would kill Jews. It's horrifying. And then you have the Netanyahu government. That is part of the problem. The right-wing government is part of the problem. The settlement policy, I believe, is wrong. I think it has bred the very seeds of destruction that we're seeing. And I think Benjamin Netanyahu now is not a man who has an incentive to end this war, any more than Hamas has an incentive to end this war. And that's why I think it's time for both peoples to pursue peace. Palestinians need a chance to finally vote for the first time since 2006. And I think Israelis, the only democratic nation in the region, the only progressive nation in the region, the only nation that has 2 million Muslims living in a Jewish country that have protections, the only Muslim nation in which LGBTQ plus people and the trans community and women and people of different religions can actually not just survive, but thrive. Those are truths. That's why I love Israel. But if Israel is going to survive, there needs to be a Palestine. And I think it's time for the Jewish people, for the pro-Israel people, for Muslim people, and the pro-Palestinian people. Let's not fight each other. Let's actually join hands now in the spirit of humanity and end this nonsense. And that's my call to action. And I think it's time for both people to choose peace. And should that happen, it's the job of the entire international community, to ensure it happens, to preserve it, to protect it, and invest in it. Because I will not tolerate it any longer. And I know you won't either. And it's time for change.
Thank you for saying that as we finish up, because it's so important. Because again, it's a statement of we need to return to dignity for all.
Yes.
For all. Whether you wear a yarmulke or whether you wear a hijab, it doesn't matter. Let's have some dignity, because stripped down, we're all the same. We're all the same. We have to have some compassion and empathy. And a lot of the time, I talked about American foreign policy, a lot of the time, the policies we've had, British had the same, they've caused many of the problems. And people have then gone against something, and it's put them against their own people. And we have to stop this. So thank you so much for that, Dean. I really appreciate it.
Dov, I'm so grateful, and thanks for the opportunity to visit. I think these are the conversations that people have to start having more of, not just here and in this continent, but all around the world. And when I say it's time for repair, not just here in the United States, but it's time to repair all around the world.
Dean, again, please tell people where they can find out more about you, about your campaign, and all the ways that they can be part of this really new movement.
Thank you. Yeah, go to dean24.com. You can join the Dean team, register with our volunteer team. We'll let you know when I'm going to be in town. You can support my campaign financially because, yes, it's a steep slope, and the only way I can introduce myself is with your support. Tell your friends, your family in the States, please get out and vote in primary day, spread the word, and show some courage. Show some courage at a time where not just this continent, this country, Canada, and the whole world needs it, but our future needs it. And this is the time, and this is the place. If not now, when? And if not you, who?
Very well.
Thanks, Dov.
Thank you. And thanks for quoting Hillel at the end. Another Jewish scholar.
Yes, indeed.
We're going to finish up here, and I want to just remind you, dear listener, if you want to find out more about how to tap into your emotional source code so that you can lead people in a way that is going to make a massive difference. My name is Dov Barron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe, because the person who dominates the meaning dominates the movement. We saw that on January 6th. Unified, actualized meaning is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. And remember, we all need to stay focused and committed to bringing dignity back. If you need my help in helping you to stay relevant, I appreciate you reaching out to me, and we need your help in staying relevant for the show. So please, wherever you're listening in from, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. It makes a huge difference, and we really appreciate it. So next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about your political courage that Dean has really challenged you to find within yourself. I'm Dov Barron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership. Impact. And I am out.
Peace, everybody.